Hello there. So in today's video, we're studying the Alekhine's defense. Alright, again, this is the second class. So let's see how it goes.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our next video on Alekhine's defense. In this video, we'll be looking at the exchange variation, one of White's most important options against Alekhines. The exchange variation begins e4, knight f6, e5, knight b5, d4, or c4. Both are quite possible, and they usually go back and forth. Now d6, c4 in this position, knight b6, and pawn takes d6. Now, after the exchange on d6, introducing the exchange variation, very aptly named, we can both play c takes d6 and e takes d6. Both pawn captures are possible. I am going to strongly recommend capturing with the e pawn, though, for reasons that we're about to get into.
Right, so this is something that I used to play, right? It's just that d6 is a very natural move for black, and it's really annoying if you don't take that pawn, if you don't do something about it, right? So that's why taking the pawn is a very common thing that you can see.
C takes d6 often appeals to players because it is more dynamic and it's more imbalanced. The position is not symmetrical. But this is also, in my opinion, a worse variation. If you are white, what I would recommend is knight c3. After black fianchettos, or as black fianchettos and castles, you're putting your bishop on e3 and your rook on c1 and your pawn on b3. This is the Voronezh system, and it has been very, very successful for white. Why is it successful? The problem seems to be that black just doesn't seem to be able to get counterplay against the white center and queen side, and the natural continuations, like e5, turn out to be very good for white. There's really not a good recommendation I have been able to find here for black after the move pawn to b3. So after e5, I do want to mention that we can exchange here, trade queens, and play c5, and this is a big problem. In a lot of cases, white's going to get a very nice queenside pawn majority and a very good endgame, and after the knight retreats, white's pieces go to natural squares, and black really struggles to develop the queenside. I've played this, I've struggled to develop the queenside, I don't recommend you do this. So instead, after e takes d6,
so
we are going to play e takes d6, the symmetrical variation.
We should be happy to see when people take on with the c pawn, right? That's something to take into consideration, right? So yeah, the development was very straightforward, right? Knight c3, if I'm not mistaken, bishop e3, and then rook c1, okay? And we're not afraid of when our opponents play e5, they're going to play the fianchetto, right? So good to know.
Variation. Now, I want to say a few things before we get into the meat of the symmetrical variation. First off, white is better. The Alekhine's defense is not the Berlin, it's not the Najdorf, it doesn't lead to a ton of draws, but it is not as equalizing as those openings. White is playing a good system, and white has more space, and white will be a little bit better. Why would you want to go into this then? I think the advantage for you is that as the black player, your pieces go to natural squares, and you're playing something that maybe you are a little more comfortable with and you have more experience with. There's less theory as well. However, know that most of these lines are not going to finish with equality, but a manageable white advantage. The other thing to note is that there are many options for both players at almost every juncture here. In many cases, there are 5, 6, 7 moves that both players can play, or white or black on their move, that will be quite acceptable. They won't change the strategic nature of the position too much, but it does mean that there aren't long theoretical lines to memorize, which will probably appeal to most of you. Instead, you should really pay attention to the ideas, as your opponent can do something new against you that is quite acceptable and that there's no refutation for, and you just need to know your ideas and feel comfortable with them. So, what are these strategic ideas you should know? Let's get into it. After knight c3, the most popular move, we're going to play bishop e7. Bishop e7 is basically always going to be our 6th move in this position. We are getting ready to castle. We're not going to fianchetto the bishop, but we will get it to the long diagonal without softening the dark squares around our king. So bishop e7. Now bishop d3 is the most natural move. It's played very often, but I want to mention some alternatives here as well before we get back into this kind of main line, if you will, although there's a lot of options, and they're all played fairly often. Okay. So first off, I want to mention here the move knight f3. After knight f3, which a lot of white players avoid because of this move, I do not recommend bishop g4. Why don't I recommend the natural development of the bishop that pins the knight? And the reason is that I think that we don't want to give up the bishop for the knight. If h3, for example, I do not want to capture here and give white the bishop pair and a nice center. This is a very pleasant position for white, and there's not a lot that we are getting out of it in return. Avoid this line. Okay. But if the bishop pulls back, then although I wouldn't play this right away, I would recommend developing the bishop, trying to let black castle. At some point, the move g4 is really nice for white. You might think that this is loosening, but there's just not enough pieces on the king side for black to make a problem. Instead, this seems to just give white a nice spatial plus, and these pawns are actually very, very well placed on h3 and g4, and you really struggle to get counterplay here. I've played this. I've even played this against computers that were at some point shut down, and I found it very unpleasant to play against this, so I do not recommend allowing h3 and g4, and especially I do not recommend encouraging it by putting your bishop on g4. So, instead, after knight f3, we should go ahead and play castles. Now, castles is a natural move, of course, and we're waiting a little bit to see what white does. Bishop e2 is very natural, although bishop d3 is, of course, quite possible. A lot of times, bishop d3 is a little worse because it interferes with the queen support of d4. Now, bishop e6. I really want you to take this position and kind of put it in your memory box for black. The white side can be a little bit different, but this position for black should be well stored in your memory because it's going to be one that we reach over and over again in this position, in this variation. We're going to be playing bishop e7, castling, and then bishop e6. Now, bishop e6 produces a small crisis for white. After bishop e6, we're putting pressure on the c4 pawn, and white has 2 choices. White can either play pawn d5 or b3. After d5, we are really happy to go here. Now, a moment ago, I spent a lot of time saying, don't do this. Why would you put the bishop on g4 if you're not going to exchange it on f3? The answer is that we are now thrilled to exchange it on f3. Thank you so much for this position. What's the difference? The difference is white committed to d5. That closed the position a little bit. It took some of the dynamic potential of white center away. It makes this bishop worse, and it's going to give good squares to our knights and good control of the dark squares to our bishop. So we love to see d5, and we want to encourage white to play it with the move bishop e6. If white doesn't go for pawn d5 after bishop e6, the natural thing is pawn b3. What are we going to do now? Well, you're almost always going to meet b3 with pawn d5, and bishop e6 helps support this pawn. Now, of course, white doesn't want to let you capture, and white definitely doesn't want to capture on b5 and allow your pieces back into the middle. So c5 is the move.
obvious.
At this point, the knight can step to c8 or d7. Both are playable in this position. In this case, I would prefer c8 slightly. And after bishop f6, knight e7, knight f5, we're going to have good pressure on the white center. The d4 pawn is a nice target. We also have moves like knight c6 and b6 to further pressure the center and try and chip away at it. Black is close to equality and has good places for his pieces, even though the position is relatively cramped. Now, there are a couple of other seventh moves that I want to mention. One is pawn h3. And all I want to say about pawn h3 is that a lot of amateur players play it because they don't want to get pinned after knight f3, bishop g4. But we just said we're not going to put the bishop on g4 anyway unless white has played pawn d5. So we're very happy to see this, and I'm not going to say anything else. Otherwise, just continue like you would normally and be happy white spent a move on h3. The other possibility I want to mention is bishop e3. This is actually a line that I played against an expert, and although I don't think you'll be so fortunate as to have someone play the same way against you, I often get in the idea here. I castled, and my opponent played rook c1. Honestly, I think he was thinking of the Voronezh system where you capture with the c-pawn when the rook does go to c1. If so, he just had his move orders confused. But in this position, I want to mention the idea of bishop g5. I do often have opponents put the bishop on e3 in some version of this kind of setup. Could be a little different, but something like this. And if you have got your bishop on e7, they've got their bishop on e3, and you castle, you're in a really good spot to play bishop g5. In this case, black is already better, and you're very happy to be exchanging here the two dark square bishops and getting some pressure on the e-file. Watch for opportunities to do this. Okay, backing up. After bishop e7, let's try bishop d3, which is very popular for white and does seem to be a good challenging continuation. We can go ahead and castle, and now white has two choices, knight f3 and knight e2. Now, knight f3 is probably going to lead to positions that are just like what we looked at earlier. We'll close the video with that option. First, I want to talk about knight e2, which is the most unique variation that white can pick after bishop e3. A lot of white players like this because after bishop g4, they may be able to play f3, which proves to be a strong move in this position. It gives more stability on the e4 square where the knights might go, so I don't recommend playing bishop g4 and encouraging f3. Now, what seems to be a good way to get counterplay is knight c6. We're changing our plans up a little bit, and after castles, rook e8 is a very, very natural move, and a lot of times b3 is played here. It seems to be the most popular continuation. This maybe intends bishop b2, and of course it's securing the c4 square. After pawn b3, I want to introduce the idea of a5, which can be very important in positions like this. Now you're going to be able to play pawn a4 either before or after knight b4. That gives you counterplay on the queen side. It makes sense of this knight on b6, which is a pretty silly piece, and it seems to give quite a playable position for black. Also watch out for the possibilities of bishop f6, which of course can give counterplay on the long diagonal. So, finally, we're going to close this video with the alternative to knight e2, knight f3. Now, we're in a good spot to play again bishop e6. I said, hold this position in your memory box. This is an important position. Bishop e7, castles, bishop e6, and introduce this crisis right here. Again, if pawn d5, you're very happy with bishop g4. You make the pin, you're going to give up the bishop pair, but so you have d5, good squares for your knights in the center of the board. White's committed and closed in the center, so the bishop pair is not too dangerous, and you're doing fairly well.
It's good to know.
Alternatively, after b3, here, you're again ready to go d5, c5. Here, knight d7 seems to be a little better than knight c8. Slightly different position. And you can play bishop f6, knight c6, b6, and after bishop f6, keep an eye on the tactic knight takes c5 when this might be hanging. That definitely is something that comes up in Blitz. If you can steal that pawn, you will be doing very, very well.
I hate it.
There is one other option that I want to mention here, and I want to close the video with this, because this setup here with bishop e7, castles, and bishop e6 is our core setup. In this particular and natural position, white does have one other very challenging option. Queen e2 in this position is another way to defend c4 that only exists when white has played bishop d3 here. Of course, you're not going to block the bishop on f1 with the queen, and it wouldn't even defend c4 if that were the case. But after queen e2, we really need to look for counterplay on this line. We have a narrow path to a playable position here. Rook e8 in this position, thinking about pressuring on this line and thinking about the queen and king being right here. White's ready to castle. This is a great time for it. Bishop f6, of course, the bishop's usually going here. Bishop e3, and now pawn d5. Right, we're looking for that move. Now's the right time to do it. After d5, c5, though, in this position, if we go back, white's really got too much control over the middle of the board, and we are getting squeezed. We need to strike in the center now and step forward with knight c4. Otherwise, white's just in too much control. Now, knight c4 can be a really good way for the knight to jump, but you got to have good tactics to support it when it goes to c4. Here, bishop takes c4, pawn takes c4, rook d1, thinking about pawn d5 here, and also this pawn is really hard to defend in some cases, forces us to step into the center with d5, physically stopping the move d5, a knight e5 and knight c6 now after knight e5. And we're putting pressure here. And the only way we're able to make this position work is because knight takes c4 allows bishop takes c4 with pressure right here. This is the longest line. We're finishing with this longest line, but we're able to get a playable position and get our pawn back, giving up c4 for d4. This line and lots of other lines that I did not cover is in the PGN, so I encourage you to download the PGN so that you can look over the stuff that we've talked about in this video and kind of internalize it.
Wow.
And, of course, there are other lines that are not discussed with commentary so that you can supplement the critical lines that are covered in this video with additional stuff from the PGN. Again, my core setup here is going to be bishop e7, castles, and bishop e6, trying to encourage pawn d5 or pawn b3 when we play d5, and after that, we should get a playable position where, yes, we're a little bit down on space, but our pieces find their way to natural squares, and we have pressure on the white center.
Wow, what an interesting and instructive video, don't you think? That was actually very, very nice. Let's have a look at the challenge, right? So here the recommendation is to take with the d pawn. And then after knight there. Oh, I forgot already. What was the move? Bishop. Yes. Bishop e7. You can castle. Okay. So how should black fight back in the center? So in this position, d5 looks so annoying to deal with, right? And then he went...
Nope.
No. Knight e7. Okay. What move does some recommend to attack the white center? Okay, so to attack the white center, we play bishop e6. We correspond. Now we go bishop d4. Okay, good to know. Okay, what's the most active way to save your knight? This is here.
I mean, it's alright, like...
No, you have to go. Bishop there. Okay, and this is playable. Interesting stuff. Very interesting. And how should black develop and fight against the sun? In this position, is that a good move though? Most likely. Good move. How can black win back the sacrifice pawn? I don't know.
Nope.
Bishop. With the bishop, right? Yeah, because the bishop is spin. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. It's just that it's the first time I've been studying the Alekhine defense. It's Alekhine's defense. So it's good to know. Good to know these things. Okay? We're gonna solve some puzzles and then we'll play a Blitz game as usual. So let's see. Let's try to get to 2850. Okay, so knight takes seems logical. We need to find a mating net though. Where's the mating net? Wait a second. Okay. I think that it's not knight. I'm not calculating much. I'm just using my intuition. I don't think this knight takes d7 because it's too logical. And then after, let's calculate. Okay, so knight takes d7. That's the most obvious move. So that's why I think that it's not this one. Okay, knight takes d7. Check. King b7 and then what? So yeah, very unclear. Now if we play here. What about here? Is it actually better? Not so simple as usual, right? Okay, well, let's not waste too much time. I know that. Okay, but I bet that this is not the move. Oh, so it is the move. Okay. So what I miss is that now I can give this check. This is a very strong check, I believe. Is it? Is it actually? Because after he goes there, and then what do I do? Oh, let's play it. Alright. And now what? Am I doing okay here? Does it seem? Yeah, alright. I'm getting mated. Move. So I just exchange pieces. Okay. So it wasn't about giving mate, it was about winning the endgame. Why? Okay, I'm happy to have figured it out. Right, so the pass rate is 45. Yeah, it was a difficult puzzle to some extent. Okay. The position. Right, so this seems logical, but maybe taking with the pawn is more interesting. Now, how do I get my queen into the game after that? Oh, what about this check? This check seems very nice. Just after king here. Are we creating like a mating net? Yes, most likely. Most likely, yes. I'm not so sure now that I think about it. Not so easy as usual. So what about check? With a pawn. Take with a pawn, and then he can take my knight. I don't think that's a good thing. So then maybe this check first. Then here. And I have to do something with the bishop because take. Not so easy again. Oh. Okay. So pawn takes, knight takes. Nah, not looking good. What about knight takes? A2. King C4. Oh, King C4 loses immediately because of this move. That will be very, very strong. Okay, so knight takes, king B3. And then what? I can't really play. Okay. Doesn't seem to be correct. No, he definitely escapes. Does he? Does he actually? Oh my god, this is not easy. What about taking with the queen? So if he goes back, right, we'll play king d2, and then we go back as well. Queen f2. He has to cover. Well, and he can also go king c3, so no, that's not the move. What about taking the bishop? What do I achieve by taking the bishop? Yeah. Very, very unclear. Ah, wait a minute. Yes, I think it's the bishop. And now we take the bishop. That was the move. And now we can play. Oof. This is completely crushing. Wow, tough puzzle. There were many confusing moves. I'm glad that I solved that one. 44 pass rate, okay. Now we're gonna play a Blitz game. Hopefully it goes well. Most likely no. Okay, so playing a very strong opponent. Okay. Let's see what. Okay, let's try the Sicilian Defense. Okay, what is he gonna play? Is he gonna be rock solid? Gonna try to crush me? We'll see. Taking a lot of time in the opening. That's weird. Okay. Why is he taking so long? What's wrong? I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna play very solid now. I'm gonna get in trouble wasting that much time. Okay, so since we have an advantage on the clock, I'll try to play solid chess, nothing too crazy, and should be able to win the game on the clock this time. He has to do something, most likely, right? I'm gonna take this pawn. No, I'm not gonna upset the draw. And I'm gonna take here. And I'm gonna go here. Yep. This looks okay. Should we play this? I'm out of theory already, unfortunately. I don't know much about these positions, which could be a problem. Okay, I don't think that's the best move. I'm gonna play here. Alright, so he goes there. Now I'm gonna go here, threading some things. Yeah, I'm trying to take here with the knight. Would he see it though? Would he see that move? Yeah, he's being very aggressive. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm thinking of taking anyways. Yeah, I'm gonna take anyways. This is a weird configuration, but I don't think it's good for him. I'm gonna take
Bruh.
it. I don't care. Maybe I miscalculated. Most likely yes. Yeah, I miscalculated. Not. Oh man. I guess. There are some problems in this position. It's not so easy for. Oh my god. What have I done? What happened with playing solid chess? God damn it. Oh man. Can I do something here? Is there anything to do? I'm gonna ignore that. I have to play active chess. I'm thinking about.
Huh?
Oh, I remember. Forgot about mine. Okay, awful game. Really, really bad. That was really, really bad. Let's have a look at it though. Yeah, so playing this fucking gambit was very annoying. Okay, so 96 is an accuracy already. Can I just go back? No? Yeah, this is a blunder. I'm already losing the game. Ah, it was bishop then. Yeah, completely bad. Okay, sorry.